Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe, and also I apologize, I'm a little under the weather, but the show must go on. And today we are going to talk about the police because they shouldn't be using AI-based facial recognition. Now, there was an amazing write-up on this in the Washington Post that I urge all of you to basically go read. I'm taking bits and pieces of it here and there, but let's talk about the critical stuff because a Washington Post investigation into the police use of facial recognition software found that law enforcement agencies across the entire United States are using AI tools in a way that they were never intended to be used, essentially as a shortcut to finding and arresting suspects without other evidence. And it gets worse than that from the results that they have found. Now, most police departments are not required to report when they use facial recognition, and a few of them keep records of their use. So, the Post reviewed documents from 23 police departments where detailed records about facial recognition use are available and found that 15 departments spanning 12 states arrested suspects identified through AI matches without any independent evidence connecting them to the crime. Now, if you're a longtime listener or follower of mine or actually watched my third of 4 TED Talks, I talk about this in general about being not good in terms of being accurate, especially to the standards of finding somebody that committed a crime, and here we are. Now, in most cases, they were contradicting their own internal policies, the police were, that required officers to corroborate all leads found through AI. In other words, they find somebody through AI or AI spits out their facial recognition and says, hey, I think it's Nick. They gotta have to basically verify that it's me and not my doppelganger, which we will actually talk about. Now, some law enforcement officers using the technology appeared to abandon traditional policing standards and essentially treated the software suggestions as facts. We'll talk about that as well. One police department report basically referred to an uncorroborated AI result as a 100% match. Another one said that basically the police used the software to quote unquote immediately and unquestionably identify a suspected thief. Now, essentially, the story that they had was on a man named Christopher Gatlin, and I highly recommend you go read it, but he's one of at least 8 people wrongfully arrested in the United States after being identified through facial recognition incorrectly. Now, 6 cases were previously reported in the media outlets. 2 wrongful arrests, Christopher Gatlin, as I just mentioned, and Jason Vernau, who is a resident of Miami, were not previously reported until now. And all of these cases, for the record, have been dismissed. Police probably could have eliminated most of these people as suspects before their arrest basically happened through basic simple police work, such as checking alibis, comparing tattoos, because obviously those show up on camera, and in one case, just following DNA and fingerprint evidence that was actually left at the scene that didn't match the person that AI had essentially identified. In 8 known cases of wrongful arrests involving facial recognition, police failed to take one or more basic investigative step. That is a huge problem because it's only going to get worse. And so let's break these cases down, basically because, quite frankly, this is a huge issue that is going to continue to grow. And if they're not keeping records, or very few are, this is the tip of the iceberg because it's happening in more places and we're not basically hearing about it and it's not being reported. People could possibly be sitting in jail right now being falsely accused thanks to artificial intelligence. Now, in 6 cases, the police simply failed to check an alibi. The person said, I didn't do it. I was here, not there. So one example is Coron Reed. He was arrested for allegedly stealing purses from a Louisiana store, even though he repeatedly told the officers who arrested him in his hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, multiple states over, that he had never even been to Louisiana. Investigators never sought proof that he was actually at work in Georgia the day of the crime, and that's what we're talking about. He was. And obviously he didn't do it. So, in 2 of these cases, police ignored evidence that contradicted their theory. Police in Woodbridge, New Jersey were so intent on building a case against Niger Parks that basically he was a robbery suspect that they cast aside the actual DNA and fingerprint evidence that pointed to another potential suspect. In other words, they could have cleared it up by essentially just running Mr. Parks' DNA or his fingerprints and prove that he wasn't at the crime scene. In 5 cases, the police failed to collect key pieces of evidence. Jason Vernew, the one from Miami, basically spent 3 days in jail after he was accused of cashing a fraudulent check for $36,000 at a Miami bank. Police had relied on an image of the wrong person and failed to check his actual bank accounts. That's according to his defense lawyer. In other words, they could have gone to the bank and said, does this guy Vernew have 36 grand that he just deposited in his bank? No. Okay, that's a problem. In 3 of these cases, the police just ignored physical characteristics of the suspect. Portia Woodruff, for example, was 7 months pregnant at the time of a carjacking that the Detroit police, Detroit, Michigan, accused her of committing. She was arrested even though nothing in the surveillance images or eyewitness statements indicated the involvement of a pregnant woman. And usually if you're 7 months pregnant, you kind of look it. You know, I mean, honestly, in 6 of these cases, the police relied on problematic witness statements. After the Detroit police used facial recognition to identify Robert Williams as a suspect in a watch theft at a high-end store, his identity was confirmed by a security person who was not actually present at the crime. How does that work? And so here's the thing. Hundreds of police departments, for example, in just Michigan and Florida alone, have the ability to run images through statewide facial recognition programs, but we don't know how many do that. The number is unknown. One leading maker of facial recognition software, I've talked about them consistently on YouTube, on the radio, and SoundCloud, etc., which is Clearview AI. I think they're a terrible company, has said in their pitches to potential investors that 3,100 police departments are using their tools, which is more than 1/6 of all U.S. law enforcement agencies from coast to coast. I'm assuming Alaska and Hawaii as well. The company, for the record, Clearview AI, does not list who their customers are, for the record. And so let's talk about one of the core issues that we have here, and that is automation bias. Researchers have found that people using AI tools can succumb to automation bias, which is a tendency to blindly trust decisions made by AI and then basically become ignorant of the risks and limitations. I've talked about this where studies have shown people using large language models like ChatGPT tend to believe what ChatGPT says because it sounds authoritative when giving a response. When an AI is essentially looking through a facial recognition system and basically matching me to a suspect where I wasn't anywhere near it, and it says, well, with 95% accuracy or 100% accuracy, Nick was the one that robbed the bank. Well, that's a big problem because the police are going to say, well, the AI is, a whole bunch of super smart nerds made it. We're going to use it. And here we are. Now, one 2012 study, basically by University College London, a neuroscientist there found fingerprint examiners were influenced by the order in which a computer system showed them a list of potentially matching fingerprints. They were more likely to erroneously match prints that appeared on the top of the list, suggesting that they failed to properly evaluate the similarities of other potential matches because of the confidence they had in the system. In other words, the first hit had to be it because, well, how is the system going to lie? Right? Even though they don't necessarily understand that bias can be inherently programmed into this. I literally did a TED Talk on this. So, in one example that I mentioned above, basically that really underscores the use of facial recognition, the police in Woodbridge, New Jersey, that arrested Niger Parks, he was a robbery suspect that they found through facial recognition in 2019, even though DNA and fingerprint evidence collected at the scene clearly pointed to somebody else. And essentially, that was the lawsuit that was filed. Now, academic research has shown that some people have genetically similar doppelgangers who are unrelated to them. I'm asked half the time, am I Penn Jillette? Or do you know Penn Jillette? Because quite frankly, yeah, I do kind of look like him. So people are not particularly good, interestingly enough, at distinguishing between two unfamiliar faces that look alike, making it difficult to discern whether an AI match is the perpetrator or just somebody that looks like them. And that's according to Claire Garvey, an AI researcher who has trained criminal defense lawyers around the country on how the police are using facial recognition. So during a court deposition in 2023, Jennifer Colson, a trained image examiner for the state of Michigan, described in odd detail how she determined features of a man's face matched those of a perpetrator caught on a surveillance video that was stealing watches from a high-end store. It's the one I mentioned before. Now, Colson said And for the record, she picked this guy out of hundreds of photos returned by the state's facial recognition software as possible matches. And I quote, "I loved his facial hair growth pattern, the thickness of his lips, the fissure of his lips. I loved the thickness of his cheeks and the presence of sclera of the eyes." She was wrong. The face she was describing belonged to Robert Williams, who the police basically in Detroit wrongfully arrested based on her finding as a result of going through AI facial recognition. Oh, and if you're wondering about those 15 police departments, I've mentioned a couple here that, according to the Post analysis, are actually doing this. And again, I think it's the tip of the iceberg. They are Austin, Texas, Bradenton, Florida, Coral Springs, Florida, Detroit, Michigan, Evansville, Indiana, Florence, Kentucky, Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana, the Maryland Transit Administrative Police, Miami, Florida, Ocala, Florida, Pflugerville, Texas, St. Augustine, Florida, St. Johns County Sheriff's Office in Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, and Woodbridge, New Jersey, as I mentioned before. This is going to be a problem that we are going to continue to see. And if we don't put guardrails around this, but more importantly, actually train our law enforcement who, quite frankly, just want to do their job. I don't think they're out to get people most of the time, but when you have an automation bias and you have a cop that says, look, I don't have to collect DNA, I don't have to do anything because the AI, who, again, made by super smart nerds somewhere, is now telling me for 100% match that it's actually Nick robbing the bank when it's Penn Jillette, then they're going to take that as gospel. So training our law enforcement to understand these inherent biases are important, but quite frankly, we just shouldn't be using them. And the example that I will leave you with is simply this, because it's the example that I used in my TED Talk. A few years ago, researchers testing facial recognition at MIT basically took all 535 members of Congress, House and Senate, and basically put them into a book, trained the AI on it, and then fed a mugshot database of 10,000 convicted criminals basically in there. And the AI erroneously labeled 27 members of Congress as convicted felons. And feel free to insert your own joke right there. But that's the point, is that this isn't exact science yet. It might get there, but it's not now. And the last thing I want is an innocent person to spend literally days in jail. And Christopher Gatlin, for the record, it took over 2 years for him to clear his name after being falsely accused by AI. This is a problem, and this is something that we need to fix here. And I'm sure it's not just in this country, but we have a hard time slapping laws around anything and everything right now. And this is one that is going to be beyond important. As we are walking into the future, whatever the future holds, if the increased use of artificial intelligence is going to mean the increased use of false identification of people, and therefore people imprisoned that shouldn't be imprisoned, or accused that shouldn't be accused, this is going to be a huge problem, not to mention the fact that you can program AI to basically say anything as well. So there's possible malfeasance there that would have to be adjudicated and vetted for also. So this is a problem coming and going. I don't see this going away anytime soon. So with that, good luck to us all. And if you are in law enforcement, one, thank you for your service, because quite frankly, without police, we probably would be in chaos right now. But also understand the limitations of the technology that you are using. Artificial intelligence is not perfect. It can lie. It can get things wrong. And it doesn't mean to get things wrong. But when it's crunching numbers, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And so I might look like Penn Jillette, but Penn Jillette's the one robbing the bank, and I'm going to use that in court. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well, also on Blue Sky and Mastodon. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private and informed. Take care.